Welcome to the Wolverine Confidential Podcast, brought to you by Corewell Health. I am Andrew Kahn.
I'm Ryan Zook.
And I'm Aaron McMahon.
The Michigan football team, still in the hunt for a Big Ten title, is headed to Wrigley Field in Chicago to play Northwestern this weekend. We preview that matchup and talk some Michigan basketball coming up on Wolverine Confidential. All right, Aaron McMahon and Ryan Zook, good to be with you two here on Thursday afternoon, November 13th. A little less than 48 hours before Michigan takes on Northwestern at Wrigley Field in Chicago. You guys will both be there. Have you been there before?
I have twice before, I think, for both Cubs games. So yes, I have for baseball, not for football games. So it's going to be interesting, just the setup. I mean, I've seen photos and I've obviously seen some of the games on TV, and just how, I don't know. The sidelines are kind of close. At least the one on I guess that'd be the east side, near the dugouts. That's really really close and cramped. And I guess there were a couple games there where like the offense could only go one way in the state on the field. I don't think that's a thing still, but yeah, it's just
No.
Okay.
Yeah, that was the first ever game there they had, which was wild. They figured that out. But then, yeah, a couple games where both teams were on the same sideline, they did that. But at least the most recent one last year, Ohio State was there, and it was more normal in that regard. As far as, yes, I think it was more a choice. From what I read, Ohio State chose that we'll take the cramped space instead of like being on the same side as the other team. So, and I think it's not quite at like midfield, like the midpoint of it. You got shifted down a little bit, but yeah. Ryan, you ever been there?
Yeah, for a baseball game too. And I mean, to be honest, I thought the area just outside of Wrigley was cooler and more exciting than the actual Wrigley itself. Like, I get it's historic and all that, but I mean, it didn't do that much for me. But yeah, no, I have been there, so this will be my second time. I wanted to go to when Michigan hockey played there last year, but just didn't get a chance to go cover that. But yeah, it will be cool to see a football game there.
Your comments are in line with Joe Taylor, Michigan receiver and special team star, because he was one of several Michigan players asked about Wrigley last week during the bye, and I felt like he offered up more praise for Wrigleyville and the bars around the stadium than he did for the actual stadium. So, but anyway, yeah, it's gonna be an interesting setup in the press box. Obviously, I think we're gonna be in like the traditional MLB press box where the baseball writers sit, which isn't, I don't think, in a great like viewing spot for the game, but I don't know. I'm looking forward to the weather's supposed to be good, so I guess that's a good thing. It might be a little windy, but temps right now are looking like early or low to mid 60s, and maybe some sunshine comes out, so should be good football weather at least.
Yeah, I agree. I've been there twice, both for Cubs games against the Mets. I saw the Mets win 10-1, and I saw the Mets win 11-1 there at Wrigley. So positive memories for me. But yeah, I'll say it. Give me Fenway over Wrigley as far as the super old ballparks. Wrigley doesn't really do much for me, but it will be interesting. It's just a unique thing. Obviously, they don't play too many games there. Northwestern has had 4 there. And they've lost all of them. Now, again, Northwestern, football isn't a powerhouse to begin with, but still notable that they have never won there. So Michigan will try to keep that drought going. We talked to Sharon Moore on Monday, which is since our most recent podcast, we talked to Sharon Moore, assistant coaches, players. What are kind of the big takeaways coming out of Michigan's bye week and heading into this game against Northwestern?
A lot of talk about the injuries. Michigan's obviously banged up. I feel like we've been talking about this now for a couple of weeks. We didn't get a whole lot of clarity on where guys stood. Sharon was a little more open Monday night after he spoke to us on the Inside Michigan Football Radio show. He made it sound like there's a shot that all 3 linebackers could play on Saturday. Jay Sean Barham, Cole Sullivan, Jimmy Rolder. It sounded like Michigan did some type of practice on Sunday, which is a little rare. They don't usually do anything Sundays, but they were also coming off the bye, and guys had the weekend off. So I think they're less looking to see how guys work from a conditioning standpoint. But it sounded like all 3 of those guys did stuff on Sunday, and we're going to continue to try and practice this week. I don't know if all 3 will play, but it wouldn't surprise me if you see at least a couple of those guys back for the game on Saturday. But other than that, Justice Haynes, there's no sign of him coming back anytime soon. Rod Moore's, up in the air. Hogan Hansen could come back this week, but Sherwin also said maybe next week. So a lot of unknowns from an injury standpoint. Michigan's a banged up team, as we know, and we know they need to win all three of these games. So obviously they'll take as much help as they can get. But you also don't want to risk, making anything worse either with some critical games still on the horizon. So we'll see where Michigan stands come Saturday morning when the availability report comes out. But they did use the bye week to try and get healthy last week. That a lot of the starters and the mainline guys didn't do a whole lot just from a physicality standpoint, a lot of meetings and everything else. But they were able to get off their feet, really for probably the first time all year.
Ryan, before we go to you, I will say that a lot of "we'll see" from Sharon Moore regarding the injured players. And I got a chance to talk to one Michigan player one-on-one this week, and he dropped a "we'll see" at one point to a question. I said, you sound like your head coach. He's like, yeah, I definitely got that from him. So yeah, that is how it goes, with these injuries. But again, as Aaron mentioned, the availability report, at least, a few hours before the game, will shed some light on some of these guys.
Yeah, unless you're at USC, but
Right.
I just kidding. To me, I think one of the interesting storylines for these next 2 weeks is how much Michigan is going to rely on Jordan Marshall. Because, like Aaron said, Justice Haynes doesn't sound like he's going to be back anytime soon. I would guess that Michigan would love to potentially have him back against Ohio State. Not really sure how realistic that is. So you have to balance winning these. You can't have a slip up these next two games, but you also want to keep your horse, now Jordan Marshall, as healthy as possible if he's the only one available against Ohio State, because you can maybe you could probably beat a Northwestern or Maryland without him carrying the ball a bunch of times, but you can't do that probably against Ohio State. So he's had quite this 3-game run here, over 100 yards in each. Seems like he's getting better with every game, and there's not much depth behind him, but you also don't want to wear him down or risk any injuries there and then be left with no Justice Haynes or Jordan Marshall against Ohio State. So that'll be, and Sherrill Moore talked about it this week too. Like they said, they have a plan in place. They're going to ride Jordan Marshall, but they also want to get like Jasper Parker and Bryson Kuzdal involved a little bit more too, just to lighten the load a little bit for the stretch run.
Yeah, and I guess Purdue a couple of weeks ago when Jordan took majority of the carries and had 25 carries and 28 snaps. I'm looking at, they did kind of pick and choose spots to get those guys in. Bryson Kudzell did play 6 snaps. He had 4 carries and a couple of really strong runs, and they did get Jasper Parker in there for a carry as well. So they're going to probably be looking for opportunities to try and sprinkle those guys in. In fact, we spoke to Chip Lindsey this week. And he said Tony Alford, Michigan's running backs coach and run game coordinators, kind of mapping out a plan to try and get those guys in, because as you said, like you can't lean on 25 to 30 carries a game from Marshall. That's just not realistic. I know you'd love to do it, and I'm sure he'd be more than willing to handle it. But you don't want to risk getting him injured, because then you've got nothing. And right now, Michigan's offense is very much, one dimensional. If you take into account what they've done the last 2 games from a passing game standpoint, they've won largely because of what they've been able to do on the ground, and you can't risk losing another guy to a serious ailment. So ideally Michigan probably wants to jump out to a nice start here on Saturday where they can get some distance and try and get those other guys in the game, because you don't want to overwork Marshall at this point. It's just it wouldn't be a smart move.
Northwestern is 5-4 overall, 3-3 in the Big Ten. Played a relatively light non-conference schedule, though did lose one of those games at Tulane to open the season. The Big Ten losses are at Oregon, at Nebraska, and at USC, which was last Friday night. We talked about that game a little bit on the last podcast. The Big Ten wins are UCLA and Purdue at home and at Penn State. Michigan is a double-digit favorite in this game for a reason. What does anything stand out from kind of studying Northwestern as far as what they do well, where Michigan can maybe have some success, or just what to look for in this matchup?
Yeah, they're kind of a poor man's Michigan. They want to run the football, and they've had they've had success doing so. They're averaging almost 5 yards a carry. They like to keep it on the ground and kind of shrink games. Defensively, I'm impressed, even, that first half against USC last Friday, like the team tackling, the gang tackling we saw from Northwestern, I thought was very good. So fundamentally, they're pretty strong. I think they're just lacking that top level talent. They're able to hang in some of these games, and then they kind of wear it out as in the third and fourth quarters. And in the case of against USC on last Friday, they kind of self-destructed in some regards. So it's a well-coached team. You can tell they play hard. They haven't lost any of their fastball. They're going to be competitive and try and keep this one close. The question is, they have the talent to keep up. I don't know. All things considered, Michigan should win this game rather comfortably, but um, you know, this is one of those sneaky games where when we talked about this, like, right, Michigan can't afford to look past this game because they need to win all three of these. So they're going to be dialed in. Um, but at the same token, too, Northwestern just isn't a high level talent, and you got Ohio State breathing down your neck here in 2 weeks. So um, I don't know. Northwestern's an interesting team, tricky team. Even their three losses, two of them were relatively, they were competitive. They lost Oregon by 20. I guess that's not that competitive, but they lost on the road in Nebraska by 7. So the record could be a little bit better than it is. They got hammered at USC as well, just like Michigan. So we'll see what they got, just from a like a game plan perspective. Because my guess is they're going to try and shorten this game and try and make it as low scoring as possible.
Yeah, I guess what stands out to me is I didn't realize how old they are, and at like every position. You look at their starting lineups on both sides of the ball, and it's graduate student, graduate transfer. So they do have a lot of experienced veteran guys, but like Aaron said as well, it's not like they're the most talented bunch. If Michigan can play, avoid any major costly mistakes, they should take care of business. But again, Michigan's young. They had two costly turnovers last game against Purdue, so that's the way Northwestern has a chance in this game if they can force some turnovers and force Michigan to make mistakes. But Michigan is the more talented group on both sides of the ball, and they should take care of business. But again, you got to be careful and not give Northwestern any short fields or any big plays, because Northwestern doesn't, they do a good job of limiting big plays, but they don't really get many explosive plays themselves. So that should be a key.
I liked Aaron's reference to a fastball earlier. I expect both of your, post game stories to include as many references to baseball as possible. But yeah, that Northwestern defense. I mean, sixth in the Big Ten, just a tick behind Michigan in points allowed per game among Big Ten teams. Ninth in yards per game allowed, which I guess glass half full approach. That's the top half of the Big Ten. But yeah, the offense is more towards the bottom in some of the most important categories. Is a lot of the Michigan players and coaches we're talking about, and really have been for a couple weeks here, all their goals are still in front of them. That being, making it to and winning a Big Ten championship, making the college football playoff, and trying to go on a run there. And that is true. I mean, you cannot deny that. They run the table. They'll get into the playoff at the very least. Is there anything they can do this week that would, swing your opinion one way or the other, about whether that's, a feasible goal still?
I mean, you'd like to see them make some strides in the passing game. I know we've been talking about this for a while. Bryce Underwood's coming off a couple of games where he had trouble hitting receivers, or just the passing game looked out of sync. It would be nice if they could try and identify and find a third wideout, someone they could rely on. It's probably too late in the year to do that at this point. Obviously, you're gonna see them throw the same cast of characters probably out there: Channing Goodwin, Samaj Morgan, maybe more Jamar Browder. But 9-10 weeks into the year, it's hard to. I think Chip Lindsey kind of put it succinctly Wednesday when we spoke to him, and he said the offense kind of is what it is at this point, and they've got to try and fix some of the fundamental mistakes that are costing them, like the turnovers and stuff like that. So, you'd like to see them grow in the passing game. I think to look more, more two dimensional going into an Ohio State in a couple of weeks. But I don't know at this point if we're going to get much more from the passing attack. Bryce Underwood could be a little cleaner, complete some more balls, not airmail the receivers. Maybe that would be nice. I will say this: they're coming off a bye, so they've had some time to work on it. They've had some time to focus and hone in on some of this stuff. So, you know, you would like to see them come out and play. I know they hammered Northwestern coming out of the bye last year. I don't know if I necessarily expect that type of performance, but if you get a complete 4 quarters, something we really haven't seen much of this year, you certainly feel better with the Buckeyes in a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's just if Michigan's going to beat Ohio State, you need a confident Bryce Underwood, and we haven't seen that. We've seen it at times this year, but not recently. We like he hasn't doesn't seem like he's been trusting his reads. Obviously, the receivers and the drops and just not getting separation maybe is and some injuries to like the tight ends plays a factor too. But if he can just look a little bit more confident and just go out there and play and just trusting himself, trusting his reads, that could go a long way. We haven't seen that the past 2 weeks, which I think we're not as bullish on the team as maybe a couple weeks ago. But it could be there. They've had, like they said, they've had a week off. You would like to get, and another thing too about finding a third wide receiver, they haven't really had their top two going many times in the same game this year. It's like if it's Andrew Marsh, then Donovan McCauley's pretty quiet. If it's Donovan McCauley having a big game, then the other guy is pretty quiet. So if they can get, if you can win games by leaning on two receivers, you don't really need a third. But they haven't really been able to find just two in the same game very often this year either.
All right. Well, that's something to look for. What do we think is actually going to happen in this game? Let's get to our predictions. I know from our Big Ten picks, which is the three of us and two Michigan State writers, with the spread of Michigan favored by 12.5 points. I was the only one who was on Northwestern. Yeah, I've got Michigan 23, Northwestern 13, so close to the spread. But yeah, even with the weather, as Aaron mentioned, maybe not going to be typical November, Chicago weather. But I still see more of a defensive battle. Maybe some long possessions for both teams, so maybe not many total possessions. And yeah, Michigan team that just doesn't look great. I know this was their breakout game last year that got them, finishing strong. But yeah, I'm thinking Northwestern will remember that game and be motivated to not let it happen again.
I do wonder if the wind plays a factor. I don't think it's going to be like crazy, but I think they're saying 10, 15, 20-mile-an-hour gusts. So I do wonder if that's going to factor in, some of the decision making when it comes to kicking. So I'm going to go and say Michigan 28, Northwestern 14. I think Northwestern hangs around. I just think Michigan pulls it out at the end. I don't see a crazy like blowout like last year. It was close. I was surprised to see the point spread rise as much as it has. It opened at 9.5, and it's like you said, it's 12.5. I even saw 13 the other day. So clearly money has come in on the Wolverines, and I guess it's not surprising given the fan base and everything else, but and the success in the past against Northwestern. But this Northwestern team is scrappy. I think they're going to hang in there. I don't see this game getting super out of hand, and I don't see a lot of field goals attempted either. So I'm going to say that most of the scoring or all the scoring is done by a touchdown. So I'm going to say 28-14 Michigan.
Yeah, I mean, I'm have a 14 point game too, but I do think there's going to be some field goals kicked because Northwestern is pretty good in the red zone defensively, and I mean Dominic Zavada, I feel like he hasn't had many opportunities, but Michigan's just trying to get points when they can. I'm going 27-13. Yeah, I don't really think this is going to be a true road game for Michigan. I think that there could actually be more Michigan fans than Northwestern fans at the game. So it is a different environment. It is grass instead of turf that Michigan's used to. So there's going to be some adaptation that needs to happen. But with a bye, with Michigan knowing everything that's still in front of them, I think they come out and play well enough to at least win by 2 touchdowns.
Life is beautiful and fragile. We fall. We get tired. And sometimes we get sick. But with Corewell Health, we are also strong. We fight disease. We battle cancer. We come together. We come back. We push forward. When the body breaks, we break through. Corewell Health. We can.
All right. Well, I look forward to seeing your guys' coverage, still more leading up to the game, during and after at MLive.com/Wolverines. Let's talk a little basketball here. The men's team overtime win over Wake Forest, 85-84 at Little Caesars Arena in Detroit. On Tuesday night, Adai Mara had his big hands all over this game. 18 points, 13 rebounds, 6 assists, 5 blocks. Elliot Cadeau, the point guard transfer, got to the line often and finished with 17 points and 7 assists. And he scored the last points in regulation and in overtime. And Michigan got a stop, at the end of both periods, and that's how they won. It was a clunky game at times. Michigan's, best offense for much of the night was, shooting free throws. Shot just 4 of 25 from 3. They were 0 for 3, they were 0 for in the second half from 3-point range before Roddy Gale made one that tied the game, with just under 2 minutes left in regulation. Yaxel Lendeborg did not look as good as he had in the exhibition games or the opener. But, Michigan found a way against we'll see, maybe a borderline NCAA tournament team. I think that was a thought last year when they played, and Wake Forest ended up not getting in. But yeah, Michigan has a lot of good players on the team this year, and sometimes that can make things a little harder, especially early in the year, right? As you're trying to figure out your rotations and, lineup combinations and who should be out there in crunch time and, who works best with other guys. And, things are simpler when, all right, here's our starters, here's our, 2, maybe 3 bench guys, and this is what they do when they come in. That's not the case for Michigan, which that versatility and that depth is a good thing. But again, it does present some challenges early in the season.
What would you say Dusty's post-game demeanor was after the game? I mean, was he kind of just pleased to get the win, or was he like, no, that's kind of a disappointing performance after what we showed in the first game?
He was happy with the fact that, I mean, it was funny because he had said, like, before the game, Michigan made 19 threes in the opener, right? Scored 121 points. And he's like, we know we're not going to do that every night. Can we find a way to win when the shots aren't falling? And he got his answer right away, which then he joked about. He said, well, we're going to make 19 threes next game. So no problems. But so, again, getting the win, finding the way, they lead for much of the game, 13 points even, early in the second half. And then, things go sideways and all of a sudden Wake Forest is up 7 there, sort of late. And Michigan's got to, close with a flurry to get the game to overtime. So, happy about that. Still he's still a little confused by the lack of, some of the rebounding, especially on the defensive side, given the size. I mean, the Wake Forest coach joked that, Michigan started the tallest lineup in college basketball history. But, they did have Lendeborg, Morez Johnson Jr., both 6'9" out there with the 7'3" Adai Mara. So yeah, that's a pretty supersized front court. And there were more turnovers in this game, a lot more than they had, in the opener. So definitely some things he wasn't happy with. But again, the defense, especially, getting the stops, to get that win, he was happy about.
I was just gonna say, like, looking at the box score, and I saw parts of the game here and there, in and out, but I was amazed how inefficient Wake Forest was offensively. I mean, look at the box score. They had 84 shot attempts. They're 29 of 84 and 10 of 34 from 3. So, like, while they were successful around, from the perimeter at times, and they actually got to the free throw line and made some shots, like, they were highly inefficient, like, from 2-point range. And I got to think that speaks to Michigan's size and their defensive prowess. I mean, you get 84 shots up and you only score 84 points in the game. It was pretty wild. But yeah, like, it wasn't Michigan's best game, and yet they still come out victorious despite the 3-point shooting woes, and they were 67% from the free throw line. So I got to think they could feel fortunate to get out of there with a victory.
You're absolutely right. I mean, Dusty said, like, we just forced a team that does not want to take, mid-range jumpers and floaters into taking a lot of mid-range jumpers and floaters. I mean, that's, again, modern basketball, the analytics, you want shots close at the rim and 3-pointers. And Michigan, again, with their size, was able to, force a lot of those tough shots, or even when Wake Forest did get to the rim, they weren't always converting. Again, I mentioned, I mentioned Mara's 5 blocks, but then there's twice as many, if not more, that he affected, and including, that the final shot of the game, just a floater that, nearly, touched the ceiling at LCA before, hitting off the backboard in the rim. So his effect was huge in this game. Michigan moves to 2-0. They play at TCU, true road game on Friday night. That completes a home and home. Michigan won that game last year. TCU, 2-1, already has a, not a bad loss. They lost to New Orleans at home. So, Michigan should be expected to win that game. But again, first one on the road, we shall see. The women's basketball team, big game this Saturday. They'll be playing in Detroit as well, though at Wayne State Fieldhouse Saturday at 4 p.m. So, the football game should be over. Hope. Will be on NBC. Michigan's 2-0, ranked 14 in the country. Notre Dame 3-0 and ranked 18th. Notre Dame knocked them out of the NCAA tournament last year. So I know they're looking for some vengeance in that one. Hannah Hidalgo, All-American last year for Notre Dame, preseason All-American this year as a junior. She's coming off a 44-point, 16 steal, 9 rebound performance. But she's one of the few returners that played in that game against Michigan. It's a very new Notre Dame team overall, as opposed to Michigan, which, they've added a couple transfers that we've talked about, but that core, all those, now sophomores are back. So, and I know they remember that game, left a very bad taste in their mouth then end the season. So we'll see if Michigan can get some revenge in Detroit against Notre Dame on Saturday. We'll have full coverage of that while you guys are at Wrigley. I'll be at that game for Michigan Notre Dame on MLive.com/Wolverines. Thanks for listening.